University of Kansas for architecture and one other program as in-state students because at that time the state of Missouri didn't have a school of architecture, and then the University of Kansas or the state of Kansas didn't have. I believe it was it wasn't journalism. I think it was dentistry or something to that effect. And so they had a program to where each of the state students could go back and forth. So I went to KU, excellent school. I'm a proud Jayhawk. It helps that they have an excellent basketball program, and I was actually there the year Danny Manning and the Miracles won the 1988 national championship and party along Jayhawk Boulevard. The image on your upper left is the Marvin Hall, which is the School of Architecture. The image in the middle is kind of a campus-wide shot that shows the Campanile. And once you graduate, all the graduates actually walk through the center and go down the main hill and then march into the Memorial Stadium where the Jayhawk football team plays and graduate from there. While I was
Did
there,
you play any sports?
I played obviously I played pickup basketball. The reason I put the football there is because I did play intramural football where it was actually
Mhm.
organized leagues. We had referees. So I was that's why I put the football there and had a good time. I'm not an intercollegiate athlete, but I did, do some of the sports and things on campus. And then also pledged Alpha Phi Alpha while I was up there as well. You can go to the next slide. Once I graduated, one of the first projects I got to work on was the Kansas City Zoo. They were going through a massive expansion and renovation program. And right out of school, the architect I was working for asked me to do some research on African plains and African architecture. We wanted to create some indigenous architecture that emulated things that you would see if you were in the savannas of Africa, the jungles of Africa, and the plains of Africa. And these buildings all replicate some traditional Maasai villages, as well as some of the other Bomai and some of the other African tribes, to give you the feeling that you had actually gone back to the continent. And all four images that you see are projects that are actually things that I designed. So based on research that I did, and I was less than a year out of school when I came up with these. I actually took these photographs about 2 years ago. I'm pretty
Mhm.
pleased to say that they still look like they did when I drew them a long time ago. You can go to the next slide.
Looks good.
Thank you. Uh, so KAI is a 40-year-old company that was founded in 1980 in St. Louis by Michael Kennedy Sr. Started out as purely an architectural company. We've grown since then to be in multiple states across the country. But our core focus is transforming communities through what we call integrated design and construction excellence. And what we mean by that is the buildings we work on are going to make the community better than they were before we got there. And so we're currently in Atlanta, the DFW area, St. Louis, Omaha, Nebraska, Memphis, Tennessee, and Kansas City, Missouri, and San Antonio, Texas. And then we've actually done work from Boston to LA and Miami to New Orleans. You can go to the next slide. Our core values are we're faithful stewards. We recognize that our clients don't have a tremendous amount of resources, or if they do, they don't want to spend them all on this one particular project or one engagement. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of those and that we deliver what they've asked us to deliver in the time and the budget. And so we're faithful stewards. We listen to understand. We all have experiences and we've all done projects that look and feel similar to what the client has asked us to do, but that doesn't mean we
Mhm.
know exactly what we need to do or what exactly they're asking us to do. So we have to ask questions and then we have to sit back and listen. We can't go in with a preconceived solution or something that we pull off the shelf. There's no cookie cutter solutions to what we do. If you look at our portfolio projects or go to our website, you'll see that our projects all look different and look differently, and they're influenced by the region, but more importantly, they're influenced by the communities that we serve. Then we give back. We believe in what we call servant leadership, participation in volunteer activities, sitting on boards, and doing other things with our time and talent and treasure to making sure that our communities are better, but also that our staff is better. And then we love one another. And some people say, how is that a core value? Because we have to make sure that we treat each other like teammates. I know this is sports focused. We treat each other like teammates. We give positive feedback. We give constructive feedback, and then sometimes love means that you have to be truthful and brutally honest, and make sure that they get what they need, so that they make sure that the next time it comes out the way that everyone expects. And then we hustle. And by that we mean we work hard, we work fast, but we work expeditiously, and we work smartly. You can go to the next slide. Then we're accountable. It's just that we invest in our people so that we have better outcomes for our clients. You can go to the next slide. We believe in a diverse staff. This is an African American owned firm. I'm an equity partner. The founder of the company was an African American. In 2017, his son and I bought him out of the company. He's obviously still involved because his son is part of the leadership and ownership. His son is CEO, and I'm president of the national organization. But we believe in making sure that our staff reflects the communities that we serve, and that the communities we serve are better for it. You can go to the next
Mhm.
slide. I'm gonna flip through these relatively quickly. I know Caleb's got a bunch of questions he wants to ask me, but I want to show you some of our projects. This is Billy Earl Day Middle School. It's on Malcolm X and Al Lipscomb, near Fair Park in South Dallas. This is something we're very proud of. This project actually won a national award for School of the Year in 2014. You can go to the
Mhm.
next. One last thing before we go off. The multicolored glass that you see is actually based on a G's Ben quilt. One of the things we were asked by the school board leaders and administrators at DISD was to create a school that celebrated the pride of the community and the
Mhm.
legacy of Mr. Day. And we picked the G's Ben Quilt, which is a quilting collective based on African Americans from the early 1600s to now, which tell the stories of their families in the South Carolina area. So this is just one of their quilting mechanisms, and this is what we wanted to show. You can go to the next slide now. This is South Oak Cliff High School. This project, you guys are aware, was in the news because the school conditions were in pretty bad shape a few years ago. We just opened in January, and the students were very pleased. The administrators are very pleased. We're very pleased, and this is one of the projects that really makes you think about what it's like to be an architect, because we truly made a difference in the community that felt they
Mhm.
were ignored for so long. You can keep going. Next slide. This is Dallas County Community College, Eastfield's Pleasant Grove campus on Buckner Boulevard. You can go to the next slide. This is their North Lake campus up by Grapevine Mills Mall. You can go to the next
Mhm.
slide. You can go to the next slide. This is the Family Empowerment Center on Tarrant County South's campus. Essentially, these were for non-traditional students, returning veterans, as well as students that didn't go to school immediately out of high school. So this was a place where they could come and get the services they needed to be successful in college. You can go to the next
Mhm.
slide. Project in St. Louis. a college of nursing and health sciences school. Is on right across from Forest Park near downtown St. Louis. Next slide. Community college for St. Louis Community College. You can go to the next slide. Early childhood center named for William Clay, who is a longtime U.S. representative from the eastern area or the St. Louis area of Missouri. This is on HBCU in St. Louis, Harris Stowe. It used to be Harris Stowe State College. Now it's Harris Stowe University. Uh, Educated a lot of business and educators in the St. Louis area. And this was the early childhood center for not only educating the students to prepare them for early childhood careers, but also to provide the service for the students as well as the surrounding community. Go to the next slide. University of Missouri at St. Louis Student Center. This was at the that center rotunda, which the circular piece actually represents kind of the center of campus. So the architect at the time, this was actually a project I worked on as a project architect. Wanted to create something that celebrated the center by creating a beacon so that you could see activity and light during the day as well as activity and light at night. You can go to the next slide. For Washington University, a family learning center. Next slide. Next slide, please. Texas Women's University. Before I came to become president of KAI, I was actually a business development representative for Kennedy Associates, which is the precursor to KAI. I was sent down to Texas. As I said, I'm originally from St. Louis. I had a brief stop in Charlotte looking at business development opportunities for our firm when I transferred to Texas in February of 2002. I went to work at TWU as a consultant while they looked for a long-term architect to replace the previous architect. I was the temporary worker, so to speak. About a week and a half in, they asked me to join their staff, and in May of 2002, I ended up leaving KAI and went to work for Texas Women's University as their university architect and assistant director of construction for 3 years before I came back to KAI in 2005 as president. You can go to the next slide. This was a high school I'm very proud of in Omaha, Nebraska. You can go to the next slide. So what I really want to convey to you guys is I gave you that portfolio to show you a diversity of projects, a diversity of geographies and locations. Reason I really got into architecture is I was walking down the street, thinking about things, thinking about the conversation I had with my dad, and realizing that I wanted to make a change and a difference in the community. And the way I felt that I could do that was become an architect. What I tell people and what I tell my staff all the time is architecture is about communication. How do you communicate somebody's vision and dream, translate that to a drawing that then the builder can take to a construction site and build what somebody had in their mind's eye? You can go to the next slide. I also wanted to show that we are not the first and that we have a tremendous legacy. These are some of the historical Black architects that have been around this country since the country was founded that have done amazing work that you may not know or may not have heard of. I'm gonna point out just a couple. The gentleman on the upper row in the second from the left is Phil Freeline. He's the architect that designed the Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. The other gentleman that's in the full color photograph is Max Bond. He was the dean of the NYU School of Architecture. The gentleman on the far right His name is Paul Rudolph. You guys have all watched a tremendous amount of Hollywood stars and Hollywood movies. He designed movies for Lucille Ball as well as the Beverly Hills Hotel. If you guys have ever flown into LAX, the airport in Los Angeles, and you've seen their air uh, aircraft control tower, he's the architect behind that. You can go to the next slide. The young lady on the upper left is one of the first fellows in the American Institute of Architects.
Mhm.
Uh, the gentleman in the full color photograph, that is the founder of KAI. That's Michael Kennedy Sr. You can go to the next slide. Sorry, go back one slide. There's one other person I want to point out to you guys. Can you go back one slide for me? Guess not. No, go back. One more. Thank you. The gentleman right next to Michael Kennedy Sr. with his head on his hand, that's William Sidney Pittman. He is the
Mhm.
first African American architect in the state of Texas. He's designed a variety of buildings across the state, and he was the son-in-law of Booker T. Washington. Okay, you can go to the next slide. For all of you, I know Caleb is thinking about becoming an architect. There may be others on the Facebook Live. One of the things I encourage you to do is get a sketchbook and sketch every day. It doesn't have to be long, sketch about 5 minutes. And people are like, well, what do I sketch? Sketch your tennis shoes, sketch a juice can, sketch a juice bottle, sketch whatever you want to do. All you're really trying to do is train your hand and your eye to communicate what your brain is seeing. And the more you sketch, the better you're going to be. It's like anything. You guys are all athletes. You're all thinking about, you go to practice. This is practice and calisthenics for your mind. How do you communicate and how do you effectively take something that other people are trying to communicate verbally or in written form and make an illustration of it and date it? And what you're going to see is that first one is not going to look great, but that's okay, but you're going to start to see progress. The more you do it, the more you're going to like to do it, and the better you're going to become. The other thing I suggest is find some architectural magazines, read them,
Mhm.
see what you like in it, write down, and even in your sketchbook, write notes. This is what I like about what I read, or and then when you're driving down the street with your parents or you're on a trip somewhere, whenever we can take a trip again, think about the things that you see and write down why you like it. Look at the proportions, look at the colors, look at the materials, and then just jot that down. What you're starting to do is create a vocabulary of design and architecture that you're going to be able to use as you advance in your career. You'd be surprised. As an architect, I've been in this profession since 1992. There are a lot of people I've talked to that say, I wish I'd have gone into architecture. I love being an architect because it's dynamic. Some of the example projects that I showed you were very brief, but they were very diverse. Every day I get up, there's something new to do. There's some other type of project. Like right now, I'm working on light rail and airports and clinics and school projects and apartment buildings and retail and office towers. I've got all of that on my plate right now, which means that I don't get bored. Um, I love doing what I do. I enjoy it every day. You can go to the next slide. And I think this is my last slide. I just wanted to end that I'm grounded by my faith and my family. This is my wife and my two daughters. Um, They've been with me through thick and thin, and I love them to death. And with that, sir, I turn it over to you, Mr. Menifee, to ask me as many questions as you have.
Okay, before we get into the questions, if you're just now tuning in, type your first and last name in the comments. You get 125 participation points. So a question while you were presenting I had was, can you tell us about your sports career and how you transitioned from sports into the architectural industry?
Yeah, so most of my sports was either little league or intramural, or even after I graduated, I played in a Y league. I wasn't a professional athlete. I didn't play intercollegiate sports, but I used that as an outlet to do other things and to just expand my relationships with my friends and do things after hours.
Thank you. Another question I had was, from me, what were the coolest designs you ever like designed?
I'm really proud of what we did at the African American, I mean at the Kansas City Zoo, the African
Hmm.
American of the African Plains. The one that I'm really excited about now is the Reby Carey Youth and Family Library for the city of Fort Worth. It's um, it's kind of innovative and exciting, and it creates a new kind of architectural language on Lancaster and Fort Worth. Um, I've got Billy Dade was very exciting. That project,
Hmm.
because of using the G's being quilt, was particularly exciting. And then sock. Those are kind of like my my top five projects.
Thank you for the response. Um, let's see. Another one from me were like, when you designed and like sketched it out, like how long does it take for them to get the message, or does it like how long does it take for them to actually start on the design?
So design projects typically will take. So there's a couple of questions that you asked. So a project will typically take anywhere from 3 to 4 years from the time somebody says, "Hey, I want to build this," to the time that you actually construct it. So it's typically about 6 months of making sure that we've got all the things in place from the owner's perspective, the client's perspective, funding, and all of that. And then it takes about a
Mhm.
year for design,
Oh,
and it takes about a year for construction. Bigger projects take a little bit longer on both ends. You can typically, I've been on projects that take as small as 3 months to design, and been on projects that have taken as long as 3 years to design. And then the construction period is typically about the same length of time. It typically takes about the same amount of time to build a project as it does to design a project. So um, think about that. So from the concept, typically what it is kind of an iterative process. And by that I mean you sit down, I listen to what you're asking me to design, what your dreams and desires are. I kind of come up with a couple of sketches. Sometimes I might sketch there with you, and other times I'll
mhm,
bring it back and have some additional sketches. But then we'll come back and we'll go through and massage it. I never take the first design is probably never the final design. There's always kind of ways that it can be massaged, tweaked, and enhanced. And typically, what you like to do is give a couple of different options at each one of those meetings so that clients can say, "Hey, I like this. I don't like this. Um,
mhm,
can we? Is there a way that we can combine some of this, or is there a way that you can go a different direction?" I think the one thing you're going to learn as an architect is that you've got to check your ego at the door. Um, it's kind of like your baby, something that you've kind of developed and grown and nurtured, but you got to recognize that at the end of the day, the design has to serve that client's need, and so you have to open
mhm.
yourself up to a collaborative conversation to make it move forward. So that process can take anywhere from um, typically a month to 3 to 4 months.
Mm, thank you. To follow up on that, when you design, do you like write down the materials too, or just sketch the building?
Typically, you may have an idea of what you're thinking, like, "Hey, I think this building should be brick, or I think this building should be stone, or I think this building should be glass or wood." but you don't typically start out sketching that way. What you really start out, there's a couple of different ways you can work outside in, which is you come
Mhm.
up with a conceptual scale, I mean, a shell, or you work from the functional spaces out. So you create a floor plan. And so kind of the best designs actually kind of go back and forth. It's kind of a tug of war. You do both because you gotta make sure that the building fits the site, but you also got to make sure that it fits what we call the program. And the program is a list of spaces and adjacencies. Like I need 3 offices next to a conference room, which is next to a break room, or I need 10 offices that are next to a training room, which is next to a workout facility. All of those things have to be massaged and in place. So you can't design one without the other, but it kind of works in tandem. Um, so that's kind of how. So materials kind of come in at they're in your head, but they're not part
Mhm.
of this. They're not part of how you come up with the design. You start thinking
Oh,
in proportionalities based on that building unit. Built materials like brick lends itself to a certain kind of module. So you understand that you have to look proportionality toward those things. Um, steel and glass lends itself to a different type of bay dimension. So you start to look at, does that stretch you out? So you have those general thoughts in head, but you don't go into, I want this building to be green glass with brown brick. Yeah, it's too,
mhm.
sometimes it's too early to have those kind of thoughts because they can cloud you from coming up with a great design.
Thank you. Really want to get that question out. How did the
Right.
experiences of winning and losing prepare you for success in the architectural industry?
Um, you got to recognize that in business,
Mhm.
arch- architecture is a business. In business, you're always in competition, and that competitive drive is what makes you get up in the morning. Is what makes you want to do a better job. Is how you feed your family, and I man, that was a really deep question. So one of the things I told one of my staff members one time was um, he was complaining about something. I said the reality is that the space we built is so that you can take care of your family, and that competitive drive helps because you have to look at each one of your staff members as part of your team, and so the collective will to win is so that you can support them in the things that they want to do and the dreams that they have for themselves or their families. And so, um, wins and losses. My wife tells me all the time. There was a time where I looked at a win and a loss the same way. If I won, that was great. That meant I had enough work to keep me busy for another few months. If I lost, it meant that I needed to close that gap and find work to close that gap a lot sooner. And so I never really stopped working. It wasn't, my
Mhm.
whole thing is I shifted and I do a lot of client management, client relations, as well as business development. How do I bring in new projects and opportunities? And so the ability to use that competitive fire of winning and losing is how we talk about, did we win this project or did we lose this project? And then we go back and we do a debrief. Why did we lose so that we don't lose next time? Or better yet, we won. So what did we do that helped us win that project? And how do we enhance that so the next time? Because you got to recognize that when you win, there's a bunch of people that didn't. And they're going to be trying to figure out a way to take your place the next time. So that competitive drive never really goes away.
Thank you. What challenges have you faced in the architecture industry? It could
Uh,
be any challenges.
there's not a lot of African Americans, even today. When I went to the University of Kansas, my freshman year, first semester freshman year, there were 10 African American students out of 144 members of the incoming freshman class. By
Mhm.
the end of May, second semester, my freshman year, you're looking at the only African American student that survived that kind of gauntlet of process. That translates into the work world. So you're typically one of a few African American architects in any space. And so you have to navigate that world. The other thing is going into, so that's, I could go deeper into that, but I think there's some other lessons that you can learn as well. From the business perspective, I learned early on how to open new markets. Going
Mhm.
into a new market is challenging, especially for architects. And architecture is it is a professional degree. So when you go to school, pick the school that's going to give you an accredited degree so that you can get registered once it's time to start taking your test. But it's not always viewed the same way. We're not compensated the same way lawyers and doctors are, but there's
Mhm.
an intrinsic artistic, it's kind of the marriage of art and science, but there's intrinsic emotional tie to what we do. So we love what we do. But when you go into new markets, because there's so much emotion tied into what we do, it's hard to get clients to look at new architects and new firms without being discounted because you're the new guy, and then you happen to be the new guy who happens to be black, so that becomes another obstacle that you have to navigate. um, but you have to be very creative. I think the thing you have to look at is, it goes back to your question about competitiveness. How
Mhm.
do you figure a way to get beyond the obstacles that are placed in front of you? Then a lot of people think there's a lot of math and science. There's not a lot of math and science, but business is tough, regardless of what business you're in. Business is just a tough. Um, I tell people it's a blood sport, and what I mean by that is, you live or die by what you kill and eat, and what you have to be able to do is competitively land projects so that you can bring those projects in.
Mhm. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Oh, well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything that you wanted to speak about that I didn't cover?
Um, I think I just want to encourage everybody to think about architecture as a profession that's open and available to distinct and diverse voices. I want to make sure that you recognize that there is an avenue and an opportunity for individuals such as yourselves to be architects in the future. We need your voices, we need your vision, we need your creativity, and we need the diversity of your thought and your life experiences. Your life experiences are going to be different from my life experiences, which are going to be different from somebody else's life experiences. And architecture is truly a social kind of interaction space. And so the confluence of making sure that your voice brings that creativity and unique perspective is something that we really want to do.
Okay.
I
Since we
like,
wrapped that up, we can go into the questions. So, first question is, if you love art but you hate math, can you still be an architect?
yes. So here's the truth about that. You know how to add and subtract, divide and multiply. The reality is that's all you typically do in architecture. The higher level math that they give you or that you have to take is essentially, I call it gymnastics or calisthenics for your brain. So think about it this way. If you come to a wall and you haven't exercised the creative aspects of your brain or the critical thinking aspects of your brain, you think the wall is going to stop you from getting to your expected goal or your anticipated goal. But with math, you start to think it different different objects and different solutions. I can go over the wall, I can go to
Mhm.
the right of the wall, I can go to the left of the wall, or I can go under the wall, or I can go through the wall. But if you've been if you haven't exercised your brain to where you can start to think about things abstractly, creatively, or differently, then you see an obstacle that can't be overcome. And so what I tell people is math is an exercise to train your brain to start to communicate with itself in different ways than you ever thought were possible. So yeah, you can definitely still be an architect without loving math. I'm gonna raise my hand so that you guys can see it. My mom was a math educator before she retired. My dad was an accountant. My brother is a civil engineer. I hated math, but I loved architecture. And to this day, I still love architecture. And so I can tell you quite candidly, quite honestly, that yes, you can be an architect by hating math. And but you have to get through it. You can't avoid it, but um you can still have an enjoyable career. I hope that answered your question, young lady.
All right. The next question is: was architecture your first choice of career, or was it something else?
Architecture was my first choice. I don't think I had a fallback plan. This is something I want to do. The thing about architecture is it trains you so widely that you can do a variety of things. I know architects now that have gone on to like I've had guys that have tennis shoe collections. Like, they collected all the Nikes. And so he wanted to create stands. He decided that he was doing that so well and making so much money at it that that's what he's doing. I've had other architects come in and become fashion designers or graphic designers. Um, so you don't necessarily end up having to be an architect. You can do other things with it because your education is so well rounded that it touches a lot of different things, and then you can specialize on masters of business administration or some other postgraduate degree at that point. But yeah, architecture was my first and only choice. And in it, I've lived in Kansas City, St. Louis, Charlotte, and here, and I've traveled across the country doing projects. So it's allowed me to have the lifestyle that I've wanted and dreamed about.
The next question is: what's the hardest thing about architecture?
Recognizing that it's not about just beauty and art. It is really about the health, safety, and welfare of the people that actually go into your space. When you design something and the codes and all the registrations and the licensing that you have to attain is based on the fact that you have to protect the individuals that are coming into the space that you've designed so that the buildings don't fall down or that it doesn't poison them with, infected this or infected that. It's all about making sure that you take care of people. So the hardest thing is how do you balance that? Because sometimes some of the prettiest things may not be the safest things. Or I tell people you can design anything and you can build anything, but there's a cost associated with it and there's a premium after a certain point. So how do you balance that budget with the realities of what you're trying to achieve?
See if there's any more questions. Who is your favorite architect?
My favorite architect is Louis Sullivan. He was an architect from Chicago that designed one of the first skyscrapers. Took the buildings above a certain level and created some very iconic architecture. I thought I wanted to be a historic preservationist and preserve historic architecture. What I recognize is that no, architecture is a time and place. I like to make sure that we create architecture that's of this time and of this place, and that it's reflective of the people that live in the spaces that are going to utilize, live, or work or play in the spaces that we do, um, but they're not so trendy or kitschy, so to speak, that they kind of transcend time. And some of his spaces and designs are iconic and groundbreaking, and have established some foundations that people have used and still to this day.
really good answer.
Thank you.
Any more questions? So if there's not any more questions, we can begin to close out here. Thank you, Mr. James, for taking time out of your day to come speak with us. Oh, and don't forget, students, go down to the website and do your activities for more points. And tomorrow, stay tuned for like there's one question. What lifestyle comes with being an architect?
It's like with anything. What you pour into it is what you get out of it. I know some architects that live a jet setting lifestyle, have flashy cars. I know others that live very frugally. It depends on what you want to get out of it and what you're going to invest in it. And the thing that you really need to understand is you have to invest in yourself. I think the first investment you have to make is you have to invest in what you want in the future and map out a strategy and a plan. And what I tell people is, I used to tell people, hey, give me a 3 year and a 5 year plan. Life is moving too fast now. I know you guys, the younger you are, the slower it moves, but the older you get, the faster it moves. But the reality is that things are changing from a technology standpoint, from a society standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, that you should really map out a strategy. Hey, this is where I want to go, and be flexible and nimble enough to kind of pivot and move. So the reality is that I I'm a part owner. I'm a partner in the firm. We have over 120 employees. Um, so I've been able to travel. I love to travel. My wife loves to travel. My girls love to travel. Uh, Prayerfully and thankfully, they both on to their own careers. But I was able to provide the lifestyle that I wanted for them to do the things. One went to historically black college and university, and the other is in the creative space as a cosmetologist. And so they're both loving what they're doing.
Good, good. Think there's one more question before we close out. Just gotta give it a minute.
Well, Caleb, I hope I answered some of your questions.
Oh, you did. I promise you did. Is architect a hard or difficult career?
Um, yeah, I'll say it is. It's not an easy career. And it is not without its challenges. I think one of the things I noticed, or one of the things I've learned, is you have to take control of your own career. Um, when you guys go through school, come out of high school, and go to college, whichever career you go into, take charge of your career. A professor in college was watching me over the course of a semester and pulled me aside one day and he said, Darren, you have all the skill to do whatever you want in life, but it looks like you're just sitting in a canoe floating down the river, letting the current take you wherever you want to go. Put your oar in the river and actually steer the direction and make the things happen that you think should happen. And I say that to say when I was um, a year and a half out of school, I was sitting in a office and I looked over and there was a cubicle, and the cubicle was the same size as mine. I'm 2 years out of school. I'm like, this is a pretty nice cubicle. I got a computer, I've got files, I've got all the things I need to do my job. And then I looked over at my friend's cubicle, and his cubicle was the same size. I'm like, that's cool. But then I recognized that my friend was uh, 10 to 15 years my junior. Senior. He had been in the career for a while. And I'm like, his career is probably exactly where he wanted it to be. And I knew that's not where I wanted my career to be. I wanted to do different things. I wanted to be in a position that I'm in right now. But you gotta I recognize that I have to start laying that groundwork then. So I went to the founder and chairman of the company and said, teach me the business side of architecture because I don't want to be in a cubicle
Mhm.
at that age. And so to answer your question, is architecture hard? It's no harder or easier than other careers. It does take a level of creativity. It does take a level of vision. Um, but you talk to CPAs and accountants and finance folks, they all have the same challenges and pressures. It's just different pressures.
Mhm.
It's where your passion lies. It's where your skill set lies, but whatever you choose to go into is still going to be you're still going to have the obstacles, but wherever you choose to go, make sure you put your oar in the water and you make the decision on what you want to do with your career. Talk to your supervisors, explain where you want to go, map out a strategy, and then look at it like this. I tell people goals are great to have, but that shouldn't be the end of your dream. When you reach your goal, pat yourself on the back, take a deep breath, congratulate yourself, but start writing a new set of goals where you want to go next. Never rest on your laurels. So, architecture is hard. Don't get me wrong, it is a hard profession, but I've enjoyed it so much that the hard days are just part of the package. And I think, watching my mom as an educator and my dad as an accountant and, my brother as an engineer, they come home with their share of struggles and things as well when we have those conversations.
Really, really good. Thank you. Well, I think that was our last question. As I said earlier, thank you for taking your time out of your day to come speak with us. Really appreciate it. Oh yeah, as I said earlier, kids, go down to your website and do the activities for more points for like Xbox gift cards and PS4 gift cards and all that. And Mr. James, thank you, and we'll see you later.
All right. Thank you. Have a great
Bye.
day. Bye.
Have a great day too.